Juan Mendez Scott's The Guest Room, Chapter 12. A Visit from Detective Cookie Baltimore. The doorbell rang. My mother rushed to get the door, as if she wanted to run outside to get away from Mrs. Osborn's wailing. She opened the door. It was Detective Cookie Baltimore and a young police officer. I had seen her on the news a couple of times before, discussing a crime or murder and trying to solve it. Or after she had solved it. "Sorry to bother you all," Cookie said, showing her badge. Detective Baltimore was a tiny woman in her early 30s. She always wore dark suits and tiny little shoes, with her badge clipped to the waist of her pants. Long curly hair draped down her back, with her reddish-orange complexion. Although tiny with those small button eyes of hers, she could be an intimidating woman. My mom looked at the badge, caught off guard. "Yes, how can I help you? Is this about the sinkhole?" Not really," Cookie said. "I'm Detective Cookie Baltimore, by the way. This is Officer Sims." Sims nodded with a slight grin. "How can I help you, Detective? Come on in." Cookie and the police officer stepped in. "I was told that I could find Mrs. Osborn here," Cookie said. Mr. Osborn looked at his wife and then at me. "Which one?" Cookie looked around at all the women. The Mrs. Osborn that was married to Preston Osborn, one of the victims in the sinkhole at his home on Chris Ran Court. "That would be me," I said, stepping forward, feeling like I was in a police lineup. Cookie and the police officer approached me. We introduced ourselves with smiles and handshakes. All eyes were on me, the kinds of looks of concern that I might be in some kind of trouble. Right away I was nervous. My nerves were already bad. I didn't need anything else to add to that. "Mrs. Osborn," Cookie said, getting straight down to business. "As we were going through your home, making sure everybody was out of there and seeing how safe it was. We found a gun lying around." My heart stopped. Then it started beating out of my chest. I wanted to take off running. I wanted to, but I knew I wasn't going to get far. It all hit me at once. I was the last one who had that gun. Who held the gun. But I couldn't remember what I did with it to save my life. All I could remember was that when the sinkhole swallowed Preston and Liana, I set it down somewhere. Just couldn't remember where though. Or did Mrs. Taylor take it from me? I turned to her for answers. From the look she gave me, she had no answers. "You found a gun. Where did you find a gun?" I asked. Now everyone was moving closer to hear what was going on, especially my parents, praying I wasn't in some sort of trouble. "On the kitchen table," said Officer Sims. "From what I can remember." Officer Sims was an average-height young man in his early 20s with short wavy hair and bedroom eyes. "Do you own a gun, Mrs. Osborn?" Cookie asked. "No," I said, shaking my head. "My husband owned that gun." "That gun belonged to your husband?" Cookie said. "Yes, it was Preston's gun." "Was there any reason it was lying around like that? Or did Preston keep his gun just lying around?" Cookie asked. I stood there for a moment searching for words. Searching for the right words. I looked over at my parents, looking at them as if I was giving them one last look at me before they hauled me off to prison. "I had the gun out," I said with a desperate sigh. My voice was cracking. "I went into his drawer and got it." Looks were exchanged, and they all were wondering why. Especially my parents and Preston's parents. Now Cookie was staring in my face, looking at me as if I was in a lot of trouble. "Why did you take his gun out of the drawer, Doris?" I looked over at Preston's parents. They were staring at me. Felt like I needed to start begging them for forgiveness. Then I dropped my head. What I was about to say, I couldn't face Preston's parents when I said it. When I got home, on my lunch break, I heard my husband and my best friend making love in that room. The room that the sinkhole swallowed up. And I was angry. I was hurt. I peeped up at Cookie. She was still staring at me. "I understand," she said. "Well," Officer Sims said. "We took the gun with us." I looked at Officer Sims. "Why?" "Well, to make sure it was registered properly." "And was it?" I asked. Cookie and Officer Sims exchanged looks. "And it wasn't good." "Mrs. Osborn," Cookie said. That gun was tested. I'm sorry, I said. Meaning, do you know of Phil Richardson? Cookie asked. My stomach sank, wondering what was going on with Phil. Or worse yet, what happened to him. Yes, I said, nodding. Yes, I do know of Phil Richardson. Who was he to you? Cookie asked. I was nervous, so my words were a little shaky. No, he wasn't anything to me. Phil was Liana's boyfriend. Cookie looked at me. Liana? Yes. Who's Liana? She was the friend that was living with me. I looked over at Preston's parents, who were watching me closely. I swallowed. She was the woman that was in the room with my husband when the sinkhole opened and swallowed them up. Preston's parents were so ashamed they couldn't face me. Cookie never took her eyes off me. And I could tell by her slight nod, she figured it all out. That I came home from work and caught my husband in bed with my best friend and simply lost it. And grabbed Preston's gun and planned to kill them for it. She probably could have locked me up right there. But she had empathy and understanding on her face. And so did everyone else, including the Osborns. Oh, okay, Cookie said. Well, I guess that explains everything. My dad walked over to Cookie with his hand out to shake. I'm Doris's father, Detective, nice to meet you. What does this explain? After Cookie shook my dad's hand, she again turned to me. Mrs. Osborn, your husband's gun was used to murder Phil Richardson. I felt like I was stuck in cement. I couldn't move. He was murdered in his townhouse the night before that sinkhole opened up in your house. I nodded my head and remembered. That's why Preston left out last night with his gun. He went over to Phil's house and murdered him. When he lied to me that he was going to meet his boy to watch the game. And Liana lied to me as well. Lying on poor Phil and me feeling sorry enough for her to let her move in. When she was actually moving in to be close to Preston while they had their affair. They got Phil out of the way because they knew he was going to keep harassing Liana. So Phil's mother was right. Liana had her son murdered. Phil's mom saw it coming. I explained all that to Cookie, Officer Sims, and everybody else. And Cookie came to the conclusion that I might have been next. That she was sure Preston and Liana were on their way to getting rid of me as well. To get me out of the picture so that they could be together. That the sinkhole might have actually saved my life from my husband and my best friend murdering me.